Hey, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. Today on the podcast, I chat with David Chalk. David is a very successful businessman and entrepreneur. And what stood out to me about his story is that he didn't truly learn to read until he was 62. It's an incredible story, and he is now working to create a program to help people in the way he needed help in learning to read. I know that his story will be inspiring. I know that it will be encouraging. It's a little more technical than a lot of the interviews I have done in the past, but I love how he explains his journey and what was important to him as he learned to read. I thank you for being here. Are
All
you having
right.
a good day?
I am. Yeah. How about you?
Good, good. It's been good. It's gloomy here. The weather's yucky. Well, your story stood out to me because you are an extremely successful business owner, entrepreneur. You have all these successes in your life, but what amazed me was that you didn't learn to read till it was a
Older.
while older for sure. I know this happens. I know that there are kids that get through school without being able to read. I don't understand how it happens. I know that some people have a harder time than others. I get that, but I don't understand how we can let kids get through without that. It just blows my mind. So I would love for you to tell me your story. How are you so successful and how were you able to do all these things with having that kind of trouble?
It took me a long time to figure it out,
Yeah.
and I think I have a pretty good answer. Um, I think I'll answer the second part. How can this continue?
Yeah.
Well, it does, and it's getting worse. I monitored the statistics. It's about 52% of all children now that graduate in North America read below a grade six level. Now, we're talking grade three, four levels in there as
Right.
well, too. And it has been going on for a couple hundred years. And I'm working on a project where I've got a fellow in California that I'm working with, John Cochrane. He wrote the book, The Teacher Who Couldn't Read. So he keeps up on all the statistics. And California is now in the worst spot in North America and continuing to decline. So, how can that possibly be? It is the way they teach English language. So
Yeah.
I'll go back and tell you my story, and then I'll tell you how I solved it. Now I got to go and deliver it to the world.
Yeah.
And maybe, somebody said to me the other day, are you smart enough to solve this problem? And I didn't take it as an insult. I just kind of smiled and I thought, well, something's been going on for 200 years. We've got tens of thousands of people and billions of dollars being spent on it. Maybe
Yeah.
if I have figured out how to solve it. So we got to be careful how we judge people. There's many different ways creativity and intelligence surfaces. And
Yeah.
my challenges, and probably 80% of all people who are challenged reading, it isn't about intelligence. So the quick backstory is I was a super happy child. Went into day one of school. I can remember it as if it was yesterday, and I have a vivid picture in my brain. And that's all part of how the brain protects us. When there's danger,
Mhm.
it records it very clearly. And again, I'm not, your audience. I don't want to insult anyone. I'm not a cognitive science, but this is what I've learned. And
Right.
I'll just tell the story. So I walked in the classroom door, and the teacher said, well, David, why don't you come to the front of the class? I was the last one in. She handed me a book and said, why don't you tell them kids a bit about yourself and read from this book? I froze.
Mhm.
And that was it. As far as I was concerned, when I look back, that was the most difficult thing that ever happened in my life because for
Wow.
the next 12 years, my life was a living hell, especially
Mm.
in the first 2 or 3 years. Kids, they don't know they're being cruel. But they tease and they bully, and then it gets a little worse than that, and then it gets pushing and shoving and violent. And I went through everything.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big kid, and I was not wanting to fight back because there was a whole crowd of people most times. And at that time, the education system didn't have anything in place to look after children, didn't even know what dyslexia and ADHD were. No teacher had ever been trained on
Yeah.
it. So they truly thought I didn't want to learn.
Mm.
I was put in the hall, given the strap, put in the corner, put in the dumb row, everything possible, completely destroying, or could have completely destroyed. And it does for many children. And I made it through. And right about graduation, I was called into the office and I was told by the counselor that people like me should be prepared for a very sad life,
Mm.
that I will probably end up on welfare, on the street, maybe dead, or more than likely in jail.
Wow.
And I had made it through school for only one reason, because of the support of my family, my mom in particular.
Mhm.
And I encourage parents and all the mothers out there that, fight and advocate for their children, because that's what they need. There's nothing else you can do right now other than advocate. In grade 8, I was taken out of the education system and put into that time what was called a mentally retarded environment
Wow.
because they thought I was that bad. And you can only imagine what it does to a child. But it was only because when I would be at home, it was a sanctuary that my
Mhm.
mom, she didn't have background training in any of this, but she knew unconditional love. And she knew that I wasn't the person they were saying I was. I was living in fight or flight. I had adrenaline and cortisol raging through my body all the time. I remember, on the way to school or coming home from school, just wondering what was going to happen to me, begging her some days that I didn't want to go to school. And she'd do everything she could to get me settled. And then I would go and come home and, life was good at home.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter was that I am an anomaly. And this will, in a minute, this will answer your other questions about me. How did I survive and how did I do the things I do? Well, I only know it in hindsight. That's a great way to learn, because if you
Mhm.
mapped out what has happened and you can step back through it, you learn from mistakes and you learn from pain. And sometimes it affects me when I think about it, because I do know what I went through. Right after graduation, my mom had always told me, you build the life you want to build. And her line to me always was, get out of your own way. And what she meant by that was, in our heads, we have that voice. And to a child with learning disabilities and has had that much pain and suffering and shame and humiliation in the classroom, it's all there really is, that I'm no good,
Right.
I'm dumb, I'm stupid. Somehow, she got me to understand that I was not that voice. And she would say to me, if you know that voice is there, who knows that voice is there? That is you. There's a consciousness there. But when you are consumed by it, your attention is on that voice and you're not with your senses: touch, taste, feel, smell in the world. So I had these things of breathing, touching cold things for a minute, smelling things that would sort of bring me back. And that truly had me realize that there was something to it. The fact that I was separate from that voice. And that voice, as I learned later, is really your mind, keeping you safe, keeping you small. And that's what it does. But that's very different to not learning to read. It sees the world as a dangerous place. It's not about the reading at that point. Everything is a fear, everything is a problem. So I learned to go forward regardless. I just kept moving forward. Now, when we say I couldn't read, I couldn't read. But what not reading truly means is flowing through a page,
Mhm.
being able to know at the end of a sentence what was at the beginning. And I couldn't, because my eyes would dart all over. Sometimes I would have to read a sentence 2 or 3 times to get through it. And, by the time I was at the bottom of a page, I had no idea really what I read. I have a pretty good vocabulary. I understood the meaning of words. So it wasn't as if I couldn't bring information in. I loathed it. I
Yeah.
never wanted to read. Even reading a billboard was difficult for me, because I just could not concentrate. I have ADHD as well too. But well, we did. She said, what would you really want to do? Well, I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, but I wasn't going to be able to do that. So I decided to be a pilot. And within about a year and a half, I had done all my training and I had got a jet commercial airline rating. I did
Wow.
the entire system. Some people find it hard to believe, but this is part of the solution, and I'll get to it, because that, without me knowing it, gave me my first glimpse of how a person can succeed. My ADHD didn't like me being in the cockpit of a plane, going crazy for 12 hours, so
Yeah.
I got out of it. I tried to think I didn't quit, but I bought a personal computer, Apple, when it was, first out, took it apart and went, you know what? I could probably build these. And I wasn't trying to be a Bill Gates. He wasn't there at the time. He was just starting, or Dell. But I saw the logic of how they worked. And with my brother and I, this is where it started to work without any background, without any knowledge, and without any money. We built a company to over $150 million, had over 500 employees. We were in Canada and the US. I took over companies, I bought companies. But what I realized then, there was a sort of flow going on. I would just be present to everything that was happening. That voice in my head, yeah, it was there, but my attention was not on it because I had enough small wins that would keep me moving forward. And that's a
Mhm.
big part of life. We find when people are in a place where they believe in themselves and they're excited about what's happening, they move forward. The complete opposite in the classroom. I literally lived in anxiety all the time. The adrenaline and cortisol ran my body.
Mhm.
But when things were going well, I could literally feel inside of me something changing. I didn't understand that the opposite, which is when you have an environment of excitement. And I think the real word that I came down to on this was um, curiosity.
Yeah.
Curiosity like a child. I have very little to really be in fear of. They're exploring, they're understanding, everything is exciting, they're smiling. And so on one side, we have curiosity, and on the other side, we have fear. And that's kind of true. If you're not curious to do something, you're probably scared of it. Under curiosity, these incredible neurotransmitters of dopamine, acetylcholine, serotonin, and a few others get released. And that'll keep you in a neutral kind of position. But what I found was the more I enjoyed something, the more excitement I got, the more I believed I could do it. So many people have asked me, how did you become successful if you could not read?
Yeah.
It wasn't that. It was the chemicals in my brain inspiring me. As I practiced more and more what my mom taught me, these incredible thoughts would come through. I had, we'll call them ideas or thoughts, come at me at 100 miles an hour, and I would go, where the heck did that come from? And I've heard other people say it.
Yeah.
I've experienced it a lot because, I've done a lot of keynote speaking. I created my own television show at one point, radio show. And I'm probably the last person in the world that would be the one to do that. But I didn't realize I was working off of a drug because the feeling of doing that, the dopamine that I didn't understand, is exactly what happens to a child when they're playing a video game and
Oh,
they lean
wow.
further and further into it. And
Yeah.
I can't give you, it didn't come from me studying. I never read. I couldn't go to university. But what I always try and encourage people is that if there's a parent with a child, the unconditional love keeps them believing in themselves. If they can get them to see that they are not those horrific thoughts that go on in their mind,
Right.
they have every possibility in the world.
That's amazing. You've answered a couple of the questions I was going to ask. I was going to tell you for a parent listening who has a child who's struggling and they don't feel like the child is doing kind of going through what you went through. I wanted you to list some of the things that you had accomplished to show that they too can do amazing things, but you listed several of them. I mean, it's
I,
incredible. It's
I
incredible to
am,
me.
yeah, I've started more than 10 companies. I have done more than most people do in an entire lifetime, or 10
Yes.
people. And I'm not boasting about it. I'm simply saying that when you give a child faith in themselves,
Yes.
self-esteem is going to be lost in the classroom. But there's what I call self-worth. My mom had me believe that whatever was happening, I had control. And we would practice my self control, which was allowing me to help keep somewhere inside of self esteem. I had pain and shame and all of it. But every time I took one baby step forward, I'd get knocked down, but I'd keep going and something good would happen. And those neurochemicals, that is it.
Well, it like I told you in the beginning, it just your story amazed me because I read all the things that you had done. So you were obviously extremely intelligent. reading, of course, that's something that we need to know, but I just was amazed at what you were able to do. And I know that's inspiring people who have struggled. They can do it too. It's very encouraging to me to read. I loved reading about that. Now, you started a program online to help people read?
I haven't built it yet, but yes.
Okay.
So what happened? I wasn't diagnosed till I was 42 years old, and
Oh,
I lived
wow.
with knowing that I had ADHD, dyslexia. Yeah, I had visual, cognitive problems, audio cognitive problems. Not my
Hmm.
sight or my hearing, but the processing, prosopagnosia. The list went on and on.
Yeah.
But when COVID hit, I had a major setback. I lost my company and I lost all my
Mm,
income, and I was 62. And I really got to that point where I said, for me to do it again, I'm going to have to believe in something. I'm going to have to read more because I maybe read two or three books in my life.
wow.
And I called a friend, took me a while to track her down. And she said, David, I know a gentleman in California. That's John Cochran, who I'm now working with, who's filming a documentary. It's a big Hollywood documentary.
Oh,
And they
wow.
want to show how serious the reading crisis is in North America. It's called The Truth About Reading. It's
Mm,
online. I'll give you a link to it. It's on
okay.
Prime, it's on Apple, but it's a
Oh,
pay-per-view.
wow.
But I
Okay.
have a free link that I can give you, and any of your listeners can watch it. And it's quite shocking.
Wow.
Really does
I'm
tell the
sure it is. Yeah.
it. I think it's going to, when people watch it, sometimes they're in tears to see
Yeah.
the state of children and adults out there. But the point they wanted to make was they wanted to show that people can learn. They'd looked for nearly 2 years to find an adult that was responsible enough to be able to articulate what would happen and possibly have been a little bit more successful,
Yeah.
and be willing to expose themselves. Now, I'm a business person and no one knew my secret, but
Yeah.
I decided that I would go public with it
Yeah.
and hope that the training I went through worked. And lo and behold, I flew down to Michigan, the entire film crew, the production, producers, cameramen, lighting. To me, because I had done my own TV show before, that was part of the excitement. I enjoyed
Yeah.
it. And in 11 hours,
Wow.
not 11 years, 11 months, 11 anything, 11 hours, I was tested prior. Everything was documented in a process I went through for 5 days. The acceleration was so quick, I could literally feel myself changing. And I understood what it was after, but not at the time. In
Yeah.
the 11 hours, I was asked to read a book and write. I would never write in public. I would never spell. It was always scribble. I wrote perfect letter form. I probably had
Wow.
100 or two words, no spelling mistakes. And I read at a post-university level.
Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
That is
I hope
wild.
people will take that in and just believe that
Yeah.
that is possible because I had no idea it was possible. So what I did on returning, it was a few years, but I reverse engineered it. I have that kind of mind, and I looked at all
Mm.
the factors. Why me? How did I learn? I really did. I'm a voracious reader. I'm looking on my coffee table, probably 20 books. I certainly can't think I was that intelligent before because what I read now, at the end of a week, I go, I'm smarter than I was at the beginning of the week. Everything I
I'm
read.
going to start looking at it that way with the
There,
books that I read.
I'm going to tell you, I thrive on it. I don't just read because
Awesome.
I can. I read because I love it. And
Yeah.
that's one more thing that people can understand, that when they're trying to get their children to read, or an adult, until we get over that point of the struggle that is built up in the classroom, unfortunately,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. So I took it all apart and I looked at all the components and said to myself, okay, the methodology was called Science of Reading, speech to print. I wasn't reading, I was saying a word, I was breaking it into sounds, and I was writing it just on a whiteboard sitting in front of
Yeah.
me. There were no books, there was nothing. And the person that worked with me, one word, take the first letter off, put another one in the middle, and we would go faster and faster and faster. And we had little routines we would go through. And after about hour four, I sort of broke down and went, oh my God, like the English
I
language
get
is
it.
a code. I'm getting
Yeah.
it. And it's coming in that quick. So when I went back
Wow.
and looked at it all, I found a couple factors. I was getting one-on-one instruction, incredible instruction, which you didn't get in the
Hmm.
classroom. I was getting immediate correction, like anytime
Right.
anything was wrong, didn't let it burn in the wrong way, and I got it right away. Repetition, but changing repetition. It was exciting, passionate, it's fun. And I realized what had happened. I had gone into that which I still didn't understand, that flow state. And in that flow state, after I researched it, you can have 10 times the learning ability without even knowing it. And you
Wow.
are so inspired that the brain chemicals, especially the acetylcholine that gets released, wires it into the subconscious memory. So whereas before reading was a very conscious act of breaking down words, it sounds hard to believe, but if you're a reader, you know, you don't really read every sound after you know how the code works. You just go right through it. No memorization, simply subconscious, what I call pattern recognition.
Hmm.
A couple of years after doing that, my background is technology, obviously, and I have a background in artificial intelligence. I realized I could take all of this and I could build artificial intelligence, not the scary type that people think about, what's called
Right.
custom trained artificial intelligence. That's the sort of thing that might run a Tesla. You trust it, you get in your car, your
Yeah.
banking does it. And so when I started putting all the pieces together, I could train the artificial intelligence to be empathetic, to understand, to be supportive, to communicate, and be interruptible, to
Yeah.
deliver the science of reading, a speech to print, in a program that is not a formatted structure, but it meets the child where they are at, encourages them, has interactive gameplay in it, not like cartoon games, but
Yeah.
challenges. Okay, you've
Yeah.
got 3 words in a row. Do you think you can go for 4? I think you can. Well, look at that. Take the T off the end and put it at the beginning. What do you have? Oh, wonderful. That encouragement, that
Right.
belief puts a person in what's called the zone of proximal development, another scientific proven fact. And when you are in that zone, you're a machine for learning. So with
Mm.
AI, we can tailor it to that perfection, just a 4-degree window of adjustment. And we read
Wow.
the emotion of the child or the adult, and we are tailoring it exactly to it. So that is what I've been working on for the last few years. I haven't finished building it. I've got a long way to go.
Yeah.
I'm still raising money, and I'm not looking for money for anyone for this. I raise the money in the ways I have to raise money with
Yeah.
investors. But
Is
I'm
that
hoping to have it within a year on the market.
is that the Reading Road program?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
That's
That's
awesome.
Reading Road. There is a website and people can register on it and they'll get it for free.
Okay.
My
That's
goal,
amazing.
everything that I went through, I'm going to give
Yeah.
it back. Of course, there has to be a small fee for some people. It'll be
Right.
$47 for those that can really afford it. But for anyone marginalized, socioeconomically challenged, returning war veterans, everyone incarcerated, uh,
Yeah.
um, immigrants, people that don't speak English properly, through the John Cochrane Foundation, we're going to provide it for free.
I think that's wonderful. I worked in a school for a very short amount of time. I was not ever a teacher, but I saw students who struggled even with one-on-one. They still struggled. And so I know this is going to be so incredibly helpful to so many people. I'm very excited about that. So I know you're working on that. What do you do for fun?
Right now, for the last 3 years, that is it.
That's your fun.
7 days a week, 15, 16 hours a day. But
Wow.
again, I have a mission. I
Well, is there anything I haven't asked you about that you would like to tell me about?
talked a lot. Uh, I think in looking back, we talked about it, that I do know that parents sometimes they're so frustrated by their children because they are acting out. But you have to understand that acting out is a desperate need for attention that
Mhm.
they don't get the right way. And one thing I did learn from my mom, and I later researched that hugging a person or a child, we say it, I need a hug. It's real. That's why
It is
mothers
real.
swaddle babies. That's why
Mhm.
we hold them like that,
It is
because there
real.
are two things that will calm the amygdala: breathing slowly. Now, take a breath.
Mhm.
What does a mother do? Holds the baby tight. And if
Mhm.
you hold someone and give them a feeling of confidence, you take them out of fight or flight, those chemicals go down, and that aggression and that anger and that frustration dissipate. And that's so much of it. What I'm
Yeah.
doing, trying to stop it before it happens, and by teaching people if they've gone through it, the thing that I gained most when I learned to read was I'm not stupid. I'm
Right.
not dumb. It was never me. It was the
Wow.
system. And that's when that switch went, and I'm a voracious reader. And if I
That's
can give
amazing.
anyone any hope that reading doesn't just become something you can do, if you do it right, it becomes a passion.
I think that's wonderful. And, people deal with those voices all the time, not just, in that kind of situation. So
No,
I know you're encouraging people all over, and I'm excited about your program because, gosh, what an inspiration you are.
it works.
I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I thank you for being a guest today.
Thank you.
All right.
Anybody who wants to reach out to me, they can go to the website, sign up, and I think there's a place there where you can ask a question or something, and I'll get back to them.
Okay. I'll make sure and have all of that on when I post. All
Okay.
righty.
All right.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
Thank you so much for letting me
Okay.
share. Bye now.
Sure. Bye bye.